Commander Savik stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Claw, watching the blue planet grow larger on the main screen. His scaled hands clasped behind his back, tail swishing with anticipation. This would be the easiest conquest of his career. Earth was nothing but a primitive world that had barely managed to send a few simple machines beyond its atmosphere. "Final approach to target planet, Commander," said Officer Drac, his claws tapping on the control panel. "All 300 ships are in formation." Savik nodded. The 7th Armada was the pride of the Draconian Empire, with the most advanced weapons and best-trained soldiers in the galaxy. No world had ever resisted them for more than a few days. Earth would be no different. "Begin atmospheric entry sequence," ordered Savik. "Maintain communications blackout until we establish the primary base." On the planet below, life continued as usual. People went to work, children played in parks, and no one knew that today would change everything. Frank Delgado yawned as he stared at his computer screen at NASA's tracking station in New Mexico. The night shift was always boring. He sipped his cold coffee and nearly choked when the alarm started blaring. "What the hell?" he muttered, looking at the screen. The system showed hundreds of objects entering Earth's atmosphere all at once. Not meteors. These objects were moving too precisely, slowing down in a controlled way. Frank grabbed his phone and called his supervisor. "Sir, you need to see this. The system is showing multiple large objects entering the atmosphere over North America, Europe, and Asia. Probably a glitch," his supervisor said sleepily. "Run the diagnostic." "I already did," Frank said. "This is real." 2,000 miles away, Major Samantha Wells was having a similar moment of panic. The NORAD radar systems were lighting up like a Christmas tree. Hundreds of unidentified objects were descending toward Earth. Sam picked up the red phone. "General, we have a situation. Multiple bogies entering U.S. airspace from the upper atmosphere. They're too big to be missiles and too slow to be meteorites." "How many?" asked General Peterson. "At least 100 over North America alone, sir. And they're not responding to any communication attempts." The general was silent for a moment. "Are they breaking up? Crashing?" "No, sir," Sam replied, watching the screens. "They're landing. Deliberately." The command center erupted in activity. Phones rang, people shouted, and screens flashed with warnings. This was not a drill. This was not a natural phenomenon. This was something else entirely. On the Eternal Claw, Savik watched as Earth's primitive military vehicles scrambled in response to their arrival. Pathetic. Their fastest aircraft couldn't even approach the speed of his slowest transport ship. "Deploy. Ground forces," he commanded. "Standard conquest protocol. Disable their communications, neutralize military resistance, and establish control points in major population centers." The Draconian troops moved with practiced efficiency. They had done this hundreds of times on other worlds. Dropships descended toward major cities, carrying soldiers and equipment. The first wave would secure landing zones for the main force. Savik settled into his command chair, ready to oversee another successful invasion. He expected the humans to surrender within hours once they understood the hopelessness of resistance. "Sir," said Communications Officer Marek, "we're picking up an unusual amount of transmission activity from the planet. They're desperate calls for help," Savik said dismissively. "Encrypt our channels to prevent any interference." Marek frowned. "Sir, they're not military communications. They're entertainment broadcasts? Music? Visual stories?" Savik waved a clawed hand. "Irrelevant. Focus on the mission." In Washington, D.C., the president was rushed to a secure bunker. Reports flooded in from around the world. Massive ships were landing in fields outside major cities. Smaller craft were setting down in parks and sports stadiums. Strange soldiers with scaled skin and tails were emerging, armed with weapons unlike anything seen before. Yet the expected attack hadn't come. There were no reports of weapons fire. The alien crafts simply landed and waited. Frank Delgado wasn't waiting for orders anymore. He grabbed his car keys and drove toward the coordinates where one of the objects had landed. about 20 miles from the tracking station. His scientific curiosity overpowered his fear. He had to see for himself. As he approached, he saw it. A massive ship, at least the size of a football stadium, sitting in the desert. Smaller craft moved around it like worker bees around a hive, and walking among them were beings that looked like a cross between humans and lizards. Frank parked his car behind a rock formation and pulled out his binoculars. The creatures were tall, covered in scales with powerful tails and clawed hands. They wore what looked like military uniforms and carried strange devices. They were setting up equipment around the ship, working with military precision. But something odd was happening. Some of the alien soldiers had stopped working. They were gathering in small groups looking at devices that seemed to be intercepting Earth broadcasts. Frank couldn't believe his eyes. They were watching football. On the Eternal Claw, Zavik was getting frustrated. The first reports from ground teams were not about military resistance or government surrenders. Instead, his soldiers were requesting permission to investigate local customs. "Commander," said his second-in-command, "Squad Leader Vrex reports that his team was approached by locals offering food. They didn't run in fear or attack." "What?" Zavik slammed his fist on the arm of his chair. "This is not a cultural exchange. This is a military conquest." "Yes, sir, but—" The officer hesitated. "Many of our troops are reporting similar encounters." The humans seemed curious rather than afraid. Zavik growled. "Order all troops to proceed with the invasion plan. Remind them of draconian military discipline." But as the hours passed, more strange reports came in. Draconian soldiers sampling human foods, troops watching human sports events, officers reporting that the humans were trying to communicate, not with weapons, but with offerings of cooperation. "This is unacceptable," Zavik roared. "I'm going down there myself." Against all protocols, Commander Zavik ordered a shuttle to take him to the main landing site outside of Denver. He would remind his troops of their duty and their mission. The conquest of Earth would proceed as planned. As his shuttle descended through the clouds, Zavik had no idea that this decision would change the fate of both species forever. The mighty Draconian Armada had arrived to conquer Earth, but something unexpected was about to happen, something that would leave the entire galaxy demanding answers. The shuttle landed with a hiss of hydraulics. Zavik straightened his uniform and prepared to restore order to his invasion force. The door opened and Earth's sunlight hit his scaled face. And then he heard it. Music. The sound was coming from somewhere nearby, a rhythm unlike anything in Draconian culture. Despite himself, Zavik paused to listen. It was the beginning of the end for the invasion, though no one knew it yet. 6 months passed since the day the strange ships appeared in Earth's skies. 6 months since the Draconian Armada's last official communication with their homeworld. 6 months that changed everything. On the distant planet of Draconis Prime, Supreme Overlord Kazrek paced the grand hall of the Imperial Palace. His long tail whipped back and forth, cracking like a whip against the marble floor. The other council members watched in nervous silence. 300 warships, Kazrek growled. 120,000 soldiers, our most decorated commander. All vanished. He slammed his clawed fist into the wall, leaving deep scratches in the metal. "We have tried all communication channels." "Supreme Overlord," said Admiral Vrex, trying to keep his voice steady. "The satellites near the Earth system detected all ships entering the planet's atmosphere, but none leaving. There were no signs of battle or destruction." "Then where are they?" Kazrek roared. No one had an answer. The most powerful military force in the galaxy had simply disappeared without a trace. Meanwhile, across the stars, members of the Galactic Council gathered in an emergency session. Representatives from 17 advanced civilizations sat around a massive round table, their forms as varied as the planets they came from. "This situation is unprecedented," said Elder Jukor of the Andorian Federation. "Never in recorded history has an entire fleet vanished without explanation." "Good riddance," muttered Ambassador Plex of the Rigelian Compact, whose people had suffered under draconian conquest for generations. "Perhaps these humans have done what the rest of us could not." We must know what happened, insisted the Valerian diplomat. If these primitives have developed a weapon capable of destroying an entire armada, they represent a threat to all spacefaring civilizations. After hours of debate, the Council reached a decision. They would send an investigation team to Earth. Leading this team would be investigator Nixal, an Andorian with a reputation for impartiality and thorough work. We must also include a human, suggested Elder Jukor. Someone who understands their culture, but has knowledge of the wider galaxy. This proposal was met with skepticism, but eventually the Council agreed. They had been secretly monitoring certain humans who had detected alien communications. One stood out, Dr. Alan Blackwood, an exobiologist who ran an independent observatory in Arizona. 3 weeks later, the investigation ship Celestial Inquiry approached the edge of the Sol system. Dr. Blackwood stood on the observation deck, still trying to process everything that had happened. One day he was in his small observatory, and the next aliens were at his door explaining that he had been selected to join a galactic investigation. Still adjusting, Dr. Blackwood? Asked Nexal, the tall, blue-skinned Andorian. You could say that, Alan replied with a nervous laugh. Finding out about aliens is one thing. Finding out that a hostile alien armada came to Earth and somehow vanished is quite another. That's why your perspective is valuable, said Nixal. You understand your people in ways we cannot. The Celestial Inquiry slowed as it entered the outer boundary of the Sol system. The science officer, a small green being named Greller, called out in alarm. Captain, we're detecting Draconian distress beacons. Everyone rushed to the command center. Multiple signal sources appeared on the display map of Earth. That makes no sense, said the navigator. The signals are coming from all over the planet, not concentrated in military formations. Alan studied the map with growing confusion. These locations, they're suburbs, universities, tourist spots, not places you'd expect to find military installations. Nixal ordered the ship to proceed, with caution. They established orbit around Earth's moon and sent out stealth probes to investigate the beacon locations. The first images the probe sent back puzzled everyone on board. The probe had located a signal coming from a suburban neighborhood in Kansas. But there was no crashed ship, no draconian camp, just a modest house with a well-kept garden. Zoom in on that house, Alan instructed. The image focused on the front yard. There, halfway hidden by decorative rocks, was a small draconian communication device repurposed as a garden ornament. Similar discoveries followed. Draconian technology had been integrated into Earth's infrastructure in the strangest ways. Military-grade power cells were being used to run fairground attractions. Parts of ship hulls had been repurposed as public art. I don't understand, said Greller. Where are the Draconians themselves? Did the humans destroy them and repurpose their technology? We need to get closer, Nixal decided. We need direct observation. The team selected a remote area in Nevada for their first landing. They touched down at night, when they were less likely to be seen. The investigators wore protective suits as they stepped onto Earth's surface for the first time. Alan breathed deeply despite his helmet. Home, he said with a smile. Never thought I'd be returning as part of an alien investigation team. They explored cautiously, collecting samples and scanning for traces of draconian presence. Near dawn, they discovered something remarkable. A small town that had not existed 6 months ago. These buildings, said Greller, scanning them. They're made from draconian ship materials but built in Earth architectural styles. As the sun rose, they watched from hiding as the town came to life. And what they saw left them speechless. Humans and Draconians walked the streets together, not as conquerors and conquered, but as neighbors. Some Draconians wore human clothing. Children, both human and Draconian, played together in a park. This is impossible, whispered Nixal. Draconians are warrior-bred. They don't assimilate. They conquer. Alan watched as a Draconian male wearing jeans and a t-shirt helped a human woman carry groceries into a house. It seems they've chosen a different path here. The team retreated to their ship before they could be discovered. The report they sent back to the Galactic Council caused an uproar. The Draconian Empire representatives threatened to withdraw from the Council entirely, calling the report fabricated lies. "We need more evidence," Nixal told her team back on the ship. "We need to understand what happened to the Armada. Why? Would elite warriors abandon their mission and settle down?" Alan had a suggestion. "We need to blend in. Go undercover. If we want to understand what happened, we need to walk among them." The plan was risky but necessary. Using advanced morphing technology, the alien investigators would disguise themselves as humans. They would infiltrate Earth society to find answers to the greatest mystery in the galaxy. As they prepared for the mission, Nixal noticed Alan staring at the Earth through the viewport. "What are you thinking, Dr. Blackwood?" "I'm thinking," he said slowly, "that whatever we discover down there might change more than just our understanding of this mystery. It might change the galaxy itself." The transformation was uncomfortable but effective. Nixal watched her blue skin shift to a human tan color. Her extra fingers merged until she had only 5 on each hand. The sensation was strange, like wearing a suit that was both too tight and somehow part of her. Dr. Alan Blackwood watched the aliens become human with a mixture of fascination and discomfort. Soon the investigation team looked like an ordinary group of American tourists. "How do I look?" asked Greller, whose small green form had transformed into that of a short human man with curly brown hair. "Very human," Alan assured him. "Just remember to blink regularly and don't mention being from another planet." The team had chosen 3 locations for their initial investigation: Las Vegas, Chicago, and a small town in Colorado, where the highest concentration of draconian signals had been detected. They would split up, gather information, and meet again in 1 week. Alan and Nixal took Las Vegas. The bright lights and constant noise of the city provided good cover for any small slips in their behavior. No one would look twice at someone acting a bit strange in Vegas. "These buildings are primitive but impressive," Nixal said as they walked down the famous strip. "Your people have a flair for the dramatic." Alan smiled. "That's Vegas for you. All flash and distraction. Perfect place to hide if you don't want to be found." They entered a large casino called the Desert Star. According to their scans, several draconian communication devices were active inside the building. As they moved through the crowds, Alan noticed something odd about one of the card dealers. Gant man was tall and broad-shouldered with light brown skin. At first glance, he looked perfectly normal, but there was something about the way he moved, a subtle fluidity that reminded Alan of the way Draconians carried themselves. "That dealer," Alan whispered to Nixal. "The one at the blackjack table. Watch how he moves." Nixal observed for a moment, then nodded. "His movements are too precise. And look at his neck. Faint scale patterns visible under makeup." They approached the table and joined the game. The dealer, whose name tag read Greg, dealt cards with incredible speed and accuracy. "First time in Vegas?" Greg asked Alan casually. Is that obvious?" Alan replied with a smile. "You have that look, the one that says you're trying to figure everything out." Greg's eyes lingered on them a bit too long. "Enjoy your stay." After losing a few hands, they moved on. "He knew we were different," Nixal said quietly. "Did you see how he studied us?" "Yes," Alan agreed, "just as we were studying him." Meanwhile, in Chicago, Greller and the team's security officer, Tavik, explored the industrial areas of the city. Their scans had led them to an auto repair shop in a working-class neighborhood. "Martinez Auto Repair," Tavik read from the sign. "According to our data, this building contains at least 7 pieces of draconian technology." They entered the shop, pretending to need their rental car fixed. The woman who greeted them wore overalls covered in grease stains. Her name patch said Diane. "What seems to be the problem?" she asked, wiping her hands on a rag. "Strange noises from the engine," Tavik said, using the cover story they had prepared. Diane nodded and walked them to the garage area. "Pop the hood and I'll take a look." As she bent over the engine, Greller noticed something that made him freeze. The tools on her workbench weren't ordinary Earth tools. Though disguised with tape and paint, he recognized modified Draconian military equipment. Precision instruments designed for repairing battle cruisers, not cars. "Interesting tools you have," Greller commented casually. Diane glanced at him, her expression guarded. "Custom made. Can't buy these at the store." "I can imagine," Greller said. In Colorado, the third team found the strangest situation of all. The small town of Pine Ridge hadn't existed a year ago. Now it was home to about 500 people, living in houses built with materials that didn't quite match typical Earth construction. "These buildings," said the team scientist, "they're made from Draconian ship components but disguised to look like normal houses. They rented rooms at the local bed and breakfast, run by a friendly couple named Ben and Lisa. During breakfast, they noticed something odd. The plates and cups weren't Earth-made. They had been disguised, but the material was clearly from off-world. Even stranger was what they saw in the town square that afternoon. A group of children played a game that looked exactly like a traditional Draconian training exercise, but treated as a fun activity rather than military preparation. When the three teams reunited, they shared their findings. All had discovered Draconians living as humans, peacefully integrated into society. No signs of conflict, no prison camps, no evidence of the expected conquest. "It makes no sense," Nixall said as they gathered in their secure meeting room. "Draconians are conquerors. Their entire society is built around military expansion. Why would they abandon that to live as humans?" Alan had been thinking about this question. What if Earth offered them something they couldn't get in their own society? Freedom, maybe. Choice? "Ridiculous," said Tavik. "They are the ruling power in the galaxy. What could they possibly want from humans?" But the evidence was mounting that something extraordinary had happened. The investigation teams continued their work, gathering more information each day. They found Draconians working as teachers, doctors, artists, and in countless other professions, all living normal lives. Some kept their alien features hidden, under careful disguises. Others lived in communities where both species knew the truth but kept it secret from the outside world. None showed any interest in conquest or war. On their third week of investigation, Alan made a bold decision. He would attempt direct contact with one of the Draconians. He chose Greg, the dealer from Las Vegas, who seemed more aware than most. He returned to the Desert Star Casino alone. Greg was at his usual table, dealing cards with the same fluid precision. When he saw Alan, a flash of recognition crossed his face. "Back for another try at the tables?" Greg asked. "Actually," Alan said, quietly, "I was hoping we could talk about Draconis Prime." Greg's face showed no reaction, but his hands paused briefly. "I'm due for a break in 10 minutes. Meet me at the coffee shop across the street." Alan waited nervously, wondering if he had made a terrible mistake. But 10 minutes later, Greg appeared and sat down across from him. "Who are you really?" Greg asked. "You're human, but you know things no human should know." "I'm part of an investigation team," Alan admitted. "The Galactic Council sent us to find out what happened to the Draconian Armada." Greg leaned back, studying Alan's face. Then he made a decision. "My real name is Gregorn, son of Commander Savik." Alan couldn't hide his shock. "Your father led the invasion fleet." "Yes," Greg said with a small smile. "And he's the one who ordered us to stay." Alan stared at Greg in disbelief. The son of Commander Savik himself was sitting across from him, calmly sipping coffee in a Las Vegas cafe. "Your father ordered the invasion fleet to stay? Not to conquer Earth?" Alan asked. Greg nodded. "It wasn't the original plan, of course. We came to conquer. That's what Draconians have always done." He looked out the window, watching people walk by. But something happened that no one expected. "What?" Alan leaned forward. "Earth happened." Greg smiled, showing teeth that were a bit too sharp to be fully human. "You have to understand what Draconian life is like. From birth, we are assigned our roles. Soldiers, workers, leaders, All predetermined. No choices. No freedom. No music. No art. No joy. Alan thought about this. And on Earth you found those things? My father landed in Denver, Greg continued. He came to discipline troops who were not following invasion protocols. He was furious, ready to execute officers for failing their duties. Greg's eyes took on a distant look. Then he met a human woman named Laura. She was a music teacher giving free concerts in the park. Father heard music for the first time in his life. Greg described how Commander Savick, the most decorated military leader in Draconian history, stood frozen as the music washed over him. How he had returned to the same park the next day, and the next. How he had spoken with Laura and discovered concepts alien to Draconian culture, choice, personal expression, freedom to determine one's own path. Within a month, my father made the most radical decision possible. He destroyed the fleet's communication systems, cutting us off from the Empire. He gave every soldier a choice, continue the invasion or embrace a new life on Earth. And they chose Earth, Alan said softly. Not all at first. Some tried to repair the communications to contact home. But as weeks passed, more and more of us discovered things we never knew existed. Food with actual flavor, music, dancing, books that weren't military manuals, the freedom to decide what to do each day. Alan was having trouble processing all this. So the fearsome Draconian Armada just decided to move in? Greg laughed. Essentially, yes. Many of us used our technology to alter our appearances to blend in. Others moved to remote areas where they could live more openly. Some, like my father, fell in love with humans. He touched his face. I'm what you might call a hybrid. My mother is Laura, the music teacher. The implications were staggering. Alan needed to report this to Nixall and the team immediately. But first he had more questions. Doesn't the Draconian Empire have music or art? You're an advanced civilization. Greg's expression darkened. The ruling class decided long ago that such things made people too independent, too hard to control. Efficiency and expansion are all that matter in the Empire. Everything else is considered a waste of resources. As Alan and Greg talked, Nixall was making her own discovery in Chicago. She had returned to Diane's auto shop after noticing something unusual about the engine modifications she performed. These aren't just repairs, Nixall said, examining a car Diane had worked on. You're improving the efficiency by at least 300%. Diane crossed her arms. Who are you really? No human would recognize that. Nixall decided to take a risk. She allowed her disguise to flicker briefly, showing her true blue skin. I'm with the Galactic Council investigation team. Instead of fear or anger, Diane looked relieved. Finally, someone from outside. I've been trying to send messages for months, but the communications block prevents anything from reaching beyond the solar system. Communications block? Nixall asked. Set up by Commander Savick. He destroyed the main systems but also established a block around the planet. No one in, no one out. Diane lowered her voice. Not all of us are happy about being stranded here. This was a new twist. While Alan was discovering Draconians who had embraced human life, Nixall had found those who felt trapped. How many feel as you do? Nixall asked. Maybe 10% of the Armada, Diane estimated. Mostly higher officers who had privileges on Draconis Prime. The rest. She waved her hand dismissively. They've gone native, seduced by human freedoms and pleasures. Meanwhile, in Colorado, the third team had uncovered something equally significant. In the basement of the town hall, they found a makeshift museum containing artifacts from the Draconian fleet, including Commander Savick's personal log. He recorded everything, the team scientist reported to Nixall. His first encounters with humans, his growing disillusionment with the Empire, his decision to cut communications. When the full investigation team reunited to share findings, a clear picture finally emerged. The Draconian Armada had not been defeated in battle. They had not been destroyed or captured. They had simply chosen to stay. This is unprecedented, Nixall said, reviewing all the evidence. An entire military force abandoning its mission because they preferred the culture of their target. Alan added, according to Greg, Commander Savik's son, they found on Earth everything that was forbidden in their society. Freedom, art, self-determination. Tavik, the security officer, looked troubled. This cannot be the complete truth. Draconians are warriors. It is in their blood. Perhaps what's in their blood is what their society forced them to be, Alan suggested. Given the choice, they chose something different. The team's report to the Galactic Council caused an uproar unlike anything before. The Draconian representatives stormed out, declaring that they would send their own armada to Earth, this time to destroy it completely. They see Earth as a corruption, Nixal explained to Alan. A cancer that must be removed before it spreads. The council was divided. Some species, long oppressed by draconian aggression, saw hope in what had happened. Others feared that humans possessed some unknown power that could threaten all galactic civilizations. As debates raged among the council, the investigation team returned to Earth with a new mission, to warn both humans and the former draconian forces about the danger coming their way. Alan sought out Greg again. The Empire knows. They're sending another armada, not to conquer but to destroy Earth entirely. Greg's expression was grim but not surprised. We expected this might happen someday. That's why Father didn't just destroy the communications. He's been preparing defenses. Defenses? Against the entire Draconian Empire? Alan couldn't imagine how that would be possible. Greg smiled mysteriously. You still don't understand what happened here, do you? It wasn't just that we chose to live on Earth. It's that in doing so we discovered a power greater than any weapon in the Empire's arsenal. What power? Alan asked. The power to change, Greg said simply. And we're not the only ones who have found it here. News spread quickly among the former Draconian soldiers and the humans who knew about them. The Empire was coming, and this time there would be no peaceful integration. The Second Armada would have one mission: destroy Earth and everyone on it, human and Draconian alike. Dr. Alan Blackwood stood in a large underground facility that had been built beneath the Rocky Mountains. What had once been the command center of Commander Savik's flagship had been reassembled here, deep within the Earth. Greg led Alan through the busy command center. Draconians and humans worked side by side, monitoring screens and preparing systems. This is what my father has been building for the past 6 months, Greg explained. Using parts from our ships, we've created a planetary defense network. Alan studied the displays. Will it be enough to stop an entire armada? By itself? No, admitted Greg. But we have something else the Empire doesn't expect. He led Alan into another chamber where an older Draconian was working with a group of human scientists. Though he wore simple Earth clothes, the Draconian carried himself with unmistakable authority. Father, Greg called. This is Dr. Blackwood from the investigation team. Commander Savik turned, and Alan found himself face to face with the most famous military leader in the galaxy. Savik had altered his appearance somewhat to blend in on Earth, but his eyes still held the intensity of a born commander. So you're the one who discovered our secret, Savik said, his voice deep but not unkind. I knew someone would eventually come looking for us. The Galactic Council sent us, Alan explained. And now the Draconian Empire is sending another armada to destroy Earth. Savik nodded. We've been tracking their preparations. They'll arrive within 2 weeks. What's your plan? Alan asked. Greg mentioned something about a power greater than weapons. Savik smiled. Walk with me. They entered a large chamber where humans and Draconians sat in circles, their hands linked. In the center of each circle was a strange device that pulsed, with light. What is this? Alan asked. Something impossible, Savik replied. On Draconis Prime, we're taught from birth that Draconians have no psychic abilities. It's a lie. The truth is that our rulers feared such powers because they can't be controlled by force. Alan looked closer at the circles. Are you saying Draconians are psychic? Not exactly, said a woman's voice. A human woman approached them, her eyes kind but determined. I'm Laura, she said, offering her hand to Alan. Greg's mother and Savik's wife. The music teacher, Alan said, remembering Greg's story. Laura nodded. Music was just the beginning. What we discovered was that when humans and Draconians work together, something new emerges. A kind of shared consciousness. Zavik explained. Further, Draconians have always had the potential for telepathic connection, but our society suppressed it. Humans have incredible creativity and emotional range, but limited reach. Together, he gestured to the circles of people. We can create a psychic network powerful enough to touch minds across the galaxy. That's what we're going to use against the Armada, Greg added. Not weapons, but understanding. Alan struggled to grasp what they were saying. You're going to, what, send them good feelings? Laura laughed. Not quite. We're going to show them the truth. About Earth, about freedom, about what they could choose instead of endless conquest. Over the next week, more circles formed across the planet. Thousands of humans who had befriended or even married Draconians joined the network. The defense systems were prepared as well. They weren't relying solely on changing minds. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council remained deadlocked. Some members wanted to help defend Earth, seeing it as a beacon of hope against Draconian aggression. Others feared getting involved in what could become a galactic war. Nixall made her decision. She would stay on Earth with her team, regardless of the Council's official position. If Earth falls, she told Alan, the balance of power in the galaxy will tip further toward endless war. 2 weeks later, the sensors detected the approach of the second Draconian Armada. This one was even larger, 500 warships carrying over 200,000 troops. Their weapons could reduce Earth's surface to ash in hours. In the underground command center, Savik looked at the screens with grim determination. It's time, he said. All across the planet, the circles of humans and Draconians joined hands. Laura led the group in the command center with Savik at her side. Focus on what you love about Earth, she instructed. Focus on the freedom you've found, the joy, the connections. The devices in the center of each circle began to pulse brighter. Alan could feel something in the air, like electricity but softer, warmer. In space, the Draconian Armada dropped out, of faster-than-light travel near Jupiter. Supreme Overlord Kazrek himself led this mission, determined to eliminate the embarrassment of the lost Armada and destroy the human corruption. Prepare weapons, Kazrek ordered. We will cleanse this system completely. But then something unprecedented happened. Officers on the bridge began to gasp, clutching their heads. Images flooded their minds. Draconians walking freely on Earth, creating art, making music, choosing their own paths, falling in love. What is this? Kazrek roared, feeling the intrusion in his own mind as well. Some kind of attack. Across the Armada, Draconian soldiers and officers experienced the same thing. They saw their former comrades living lives of freedom and purpose. They felt the emotions, joy, love, wonder, that had been denied them their entire lives. On the command ship, a young officer named Vrex suddenly stood up from his station. Why are we doing this? He asked aloud. Other officers looked at him in shock. Such questioning was punishable by death. But instead of anger, Kazrek felt something new. Doubt. For the first time in his life, the Supreme Overlord wondered if the Empire's way was truly the only way. On Earth, Savik watched the screens intensely. They've stopped advancing, he announced. The lead ships are breaking formation. The psychic network continued its work, reaching out to every mind in the Armada. Not forcing, not controlling, simply showing another possibility. A choice. Across the Armada, confusion gave way to discussion. Discussion became debate. Debate became decision. When communications finally opened between Earth and the Armada, it wasn't Kazrek who spoke, but Vrex, the young officer. We wish to talk, he said simply. We wish to understand. Alan stood beside Nixall as they watched history change before their eyes. The humans didn't defeat the Draconian Armada, Nixall said quietly. They transformed it. That's humanity's real superpower, Alan replied. Not our technology or our strength, but our ability to change and to help others change too. As the first ships from the Second Armada began peaceful descent to Earth, the Galactic Council received their final report. The Draconian threat wasn't ended through war, but through transformation. The galaxy would never be the same again.